Hello, hello. This is Jonah Rank, and I'm sitting here with Stanley Eli, who is the author of 10 Ways to Your Cat's Happiness, which I'll tell you about the book in a moment. And this might be your first time watching an interview from Oholiav, and let me tell you what Oholiav is. You might know the biblical character Oholiav, who's one of the artisans who helps with building the tabernacle when the Israelites are in the desert, when they're in the wilderness. And what we do at Oholiav is we take pieces of arts and entertainment, secular pieces of arts and entertainment usually, and we look at it through a Jewish lens. And looking at it through a Jewish lens might mean asking, what are the values that are in this story? Are there any parallels in this story to any stories in the Bible or in rabbinic literature? And really, is there anything Jewish in this story? So, 10 Ways to Your Cat's Happiness is Stanley Eli's first novel of fiction. No? Not your first novel of fiction. Second? Third. I'm sorry. So, third. I've got to read 2 more now to catch up. I thought I'd read all the fiction you wrote, but there are 3. All right. We got a few more to go then. So, this is your 6th book? 5th book. I'm not that good with the numbers today. Would you like to say a few words about yourself? You're an author living in New York City, and what else can you tell us about you?
I am an author. I live in Manhattan, have lived here for many years. I'm a native Texan. I went through a period in business and then a long period teaching in a high school in the suburbs. And after leaving teaching full-time, I went back to write as I had done as a kid, and had done 5 published books and a bunch of articles. It's kept me young. I'm not far from 80 now, and I still enjoy writing. I still enjoy using that part of my brain. Have you talked about the book a little bit?
Yeah, so tell us about 10 Ways to Your Cat's Happiness.
It's a New York City novel. The protagonist is a man named Evan, who is not Jewish, but he encounters some Jewish people in the course of the story. He's a writer. He is trying to make some money, which is hard for him. He's probably mid-40s. He's unmarried. He's a gay man. And his idea is to sell an easy-to-read, do-it-yourself book about keeping your cat happy. And he decides this would be a book to sell, that he'd get a publisher for, and it would be an easy book to read and probably a good seller. And that's the beginning of the story, and it goes on from there.
I can't recommend it too strongly, or I guess maybe I can. I don't know. I love this book, though. I think I got a copy of this about a year ago, and I'm here sitting with the author today, which is a real pleasure. And 10 Ways to Your Cat's Happiness. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write the book?
I'm a cat lover, sometimes with problems.
We just had some problems with Jess, the current cat. We're
right.
good though now.
I don't know. It was just I'm a New York City person now after so many years, and somehow it was just a thought that crept into my mind that this would be a fun book. It's meant to be very lighthearted, and it is. It's not to be taken too seriously. It's a little bit of a satire on the publishing world because Evan manages to sell this book pretty easily without the publisher even taking an awfully close look at what the book is going to be. Figuring with the right promotion, it'll sell. And that is more or less what happens.
So, one of the fun things about this book also is that there's just so many stories in here. It's not only a book about Evan McGorkle, this author, trying to write this book that's going to sell in huge numbers. It's also the story of his love life. It's the story of friendship that he makes with a stranger. And Stanley, could you talk a little bit about some of those side stories that really keep this book moving too?
His best friend actually is a woman, a platonic friendship with a singer named Francesca, who he knew in college, and the two of them came to New York at the same time. And she is a struggling singer as he is a struggling writer. He has an on and off romantic relationship with a handsome doctor, Dick, who sort of represents the other side of Manhattan. Dick lives in a very fancy apartment building on the east side. Evan is very much a dedicated Upper West Sider. He lives near Columbia. Basically, the whole story takes place around the Columbia neighborhood. He also engages in coffee every morning from a coffee bar run by an Israeli fellow, a Jewish fellow, a young guy, who becomes something of a big brother to him, something of a guide, and he's a wonderful character. He really is everything good about who he is, really, unpretentious, but a decent, moral sort of man. Later in the book, he meets a man whose dog had been stolen and was returned. The man is sight impaired. He was a musician in his younger days from Canada. And it turns out, though Evan doesn't know this until he meets him, that he is Jewish, and he is a fairly religious Jew. He comes wearing a yarmulke. He's sort of quiet and not very wealthy. He has a poor job because it's all he can do with his sight impairment. And Evan is very taken with this person because the man is different from everybody he's ever known. He lives a very simple life, doesn't make much money, lives alone, has his dog to whom he's extremely devoted. The dog basically works like a guide dog for him, although he isn't officially a guide dog. And this becomes a very prominent part of the story. And the man, as you get to know him better, as Evan gets to know him better, sees a different side from what he saw in the beginning. Evan is not a religious person at all. He's not Jewish. He's hardly Protestant. This man, who goes by the initials JJ, is so attractive to him that it opens his interest in religion, and specifically in Judaism. And JJ says, well, maybe you would like to go to Friday night services with me, and he does. And this opens up a whole new world to Evan, particularly the Jewish music and also the food, because they go to a kosher restaurant. And this becomes JJ almost, though I didn't intend it that way, but it happens sometimes. He kind of takes over the story, which characters sometimes do.
It's really, I think it's a delightful read. By the way, if you hear any meowing in the back, this is Jess again. Jess, we're looking for 10 Ways to Your Cat's Happiness, and
he's been exiled to the bedroom.
Jess has been exiled to the bedroom. He bit me before, so we're keeping him away. And we are back. We had an escaped refugee. Jess found his way out. But Jess is back in a place where Jess is not going to bite anybody, so we're good again. So we were talking about all these different characters. We talked about Avram, the restaurant, the cafe keeper, coffee house keeper. And we talked about J.J. Knapp, who is the nearsighted or sight impaired friend whom Evan befriends from a lost dog ad. And we have met a few Jewish characters in this book. And I guess something that's interesting to me is that Evan McGorkle, we may have even said this earlier in the interview, Evan McGorkle is nominally a Protestant, but he doesn't have any religious lifestyle, yet we find that he begins to get interested in religious living and in more spiritual thinking and in some more ethical thinking and all sorts of things as he gets introduced to Judaism. And Stanley, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit towards that. Why Judaism?
I think it was almost an accident. First of all, he knows Avram. He goes to Avram to buy coffee, and that's basically all there is in the beginning. Although, as he gets to know JJ, the former musician, and begins to see that there are flaws in what he didn't discover about him in the beginning, he confides in Avram. And as I said, Avram becomes almost like a big brother to him. And he's really held up in the book as a beacon of goodness. He's in business, he runs a coffee bar, but he's a very decent moral person. The business with Judaism beyond that really is accidental, because he tries to help this man whose dog was lost without realizing that he's Jewish. When he first meets him, he's a bit taken aback because the man appears sort of bent and frail, with a warm top coat and a yarmulke. And that leads him, as I said, through an introduction to Judaism, largely through a couple of meals in a very nice kosher restaurant, and also some very beautiful Friday night Sabbath services, where he is charmed by the music and the warmth. One of them, the rabbi blesses a little baby girl whose parents had brought her to be named, and it's very touching. So that his connection to Judaism happens accidentally, really, and he doesn't convert. Later in the book, we learn that J.J. had a son with a woman who he did not marry, and the son appears in the book, and he and Evan form this very nice sort of young older relationship. And in fact, they also go to a Friday night service to the same synagogue where he had gone first with the father, and it's a lovely meeting. And the boy says, "Well, maybe you would like to convert." He says, "I don't think I want to do that." It's I don't know. I'm not sure that the book raises the flag for Judaism, but it doesn't. It's not bad. Although, without spoiling the book, because I don't want to do that, the character of J.J. is revealed to be much more complex than one originally sees. I did not want to write a flawless character there. He is certainly flawed.
I think it's exciting to see how flawed he is and how, in some ways, J.J. is probably the Jew that we know most intimately. And
in the book?
In the book.
Oh, yeah.
And he's a great character. I really enjoyed reading him. And something I'm wondering about, as an author, Stanley, what made you choose Judaism as that entryway to a religious lifestyle or spiritual thinking?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Who knows? Characters appear, I'm not a very good planner of what I write. It seems like it's almost paragraph by paragraph, and suddenly JJ appeared, and as I said, kind of took over a lot of the book.
Well, he's a great character.
And I'm Jewish too, so of course I've sensed the the immediacy of having a Jewish character. Two, really. Also, there are a couple of others who kind of are passing in through the book. There's a rabbi who, not a rabbi, but a man who looks like a rabbi, who Evan meets at a street fair when he's debating whether he can smoke on the Sabbath or not. And it's a funny little scene.
Yeah, I want to talk about that scene, actually, because this is a conversation that comes up in the book, and one of the traits of Evan McOrkle, our main character here, is that he's a smoker, and he knows that it's bad to smoke, that it's bad for his health to be smoking. And it seems that Shabbat, the Jewish Sabbath, is the thing that really turns his smoking habit around in the book. And I was wondering if you could talk to that, and if you feel that Shabbat is something that can help you lose a bad habit. I don't know if I don't know how you feel about Shabbat and all
That's
that.
a good question. That also kind of happened by chance. He keeps talking about the fact that he's going to quit smoking, and comes Sabbath, and he gets up and he showers and he gets dressed and he's going to go out, and he thinks, well, maybe he knows that on the Sabbath Jews are not supposed to work and not supposed to push the elevator button and so on. He doesn't know about smoking, but he thinks, well, maybe he should, out of respect for the Jewish Sabbath, not smoke. And he goes to this street fair and he sees this older man who looks like a rabbi, and he addresses him as rabbi. He says, no, I'm not a rabbi. He said, but you look Jewish. And he says, a friend of mine wants to know whether it would be permissible for a Jew to smoke on the Sabbath. And this older man says, what a dumb question. Of course you can't smoke on the Sabbath. You can't do this, you can't do that, you cannot smoke. And he says, who asked such a dumb question? And Evan said, well, it wasn't me, though of course it was him. And it's a friendly little exchange. That's all. And you don't see the older man.
Now, again, asking you as the author choosing to write this little story in the book is, did you ever have any experiences where you decided not to do something because of Shabbat?
Well, I was a smoker for years, and it infuriated my father. I was the only child in the family who strayed, and I suppose I did it partly out of rebellion. And I can remember him being particularly furious if I would go to services and would smoke as we came out of the synagogue. So it was, I suppose there's some remnant of that in this.
So you have your own cigarettes on the Sabbath story?
Well, on the Sabbath and after some service. Yeah.
Right.
I actually didn't quit smoking until my father had died. So there was no one else to rebel against.
Interesting. So, now something else that comes up a little bit in the book is we have a number of gay characters in the book. We have a few characters who are really minor characters in the book who seem to be gay. We've got a cantor who might be gay. We've got the artist who draws for the book that Evan is working on. She's probably gay. It's not entirely clear. And Evan and his lover are both gay. And something that comes up is this intersection of all these gay characters with the Jewish community. And I was wondering if that's anything you could speak towards.
That's a good question. The answer is probably yes, but I didn't develop it. I really did not develop it. Evan's relationship with Dick, the physician, is quite outside anything to do with religion, really. I think were there to be a sequel to the book, and there could be, Evan might try to engage Dick more into maybe going with him to a Friday night service, just because he liked it so much. He enjoyed it so much. I would think in the next chapter that has not been written, he would probably go back to a Friday night service, even though he's not Jewish. He doesn't plan to be Jewish, but he enjoyed it. He felt a great sense of community. He goes first with JJ, the sight-impaired man, and they walk out. And JJ says to him, "Well, what did you think about the service?" And he said, "I liked the music very much." He said, "I had a problem with so many prayers simply being, obeying the law of praising God." And JJ says, "I can understand that. I question sometimes that too. Unequivocal praise." But JJ says, even so, there are many times on a Friday night in the synagogue with the choir, with the cantor, with the congregation joining in, that he feels the presence of God there. And Evan says, "I could see that." I feel that way also.
Yeah. It's really a fascinating book, really exploring all these different kinds of relationships. And again, something we talked a little bit about it is that there's all these strangers in this book, all these people who become friends with Evan from all of these places that you wouldn't expect to meet a friend. You wouldn't expect necessarily to meet a friend at the coffee shop. You wouldn't expect necessarily to make a friend from a lost dog ad. But there's something about meeting the stranger and befriending the stranger that to me almost sounds a little bit Jewish. That this whole, I think it says like 30-something times in the Bible that you shouldn't mistreat the stranger and that you should take in the stranger. Is there anything going on there about these unusual friendships?
I think I wouldn't attribute it to anything Jewish, but I think it is part of the story of New York. That you, basically in his effort to get this book published, which is the genesis of the whole book, really, all the paths that he takes bring him in contact with different people who he would not have known otherwise. And in the publishing world, in bookstores, there's a young fellow who works in a bookstore who's a friend of his. And it I hope goes to make it a many-faceted New York City story, which is really what it is. Anybody who doesn't care about New York, I don't think would like the book very much.
The art on the cover of the book is very much this New York image. And Stanley, you wanted to talk about the artist?
Well,
the art a little bit?
It occurred to me while the book was being put together that it would be fun to have some illustrations of some of the 10 ways of keeping your cat happy. And so there are 4 or 5 line drawings in the book.
So,
this is one. Bring your cat lots of toys, I believe that's what it was. Which I love the drawing. This one, if your cat sits on your computer board, just leave him and go sit somewhere else. And then there was, take frequent photos of your cat to show him how handsome he is. And so these are dotted. There are 4 or 5 of these that are dotted through the book, which you don't always find in a novel, but I thought they would enrich the book, and I think they did.
that's great. And who did the art for this book?
There are 2 different people.
2 different people.
One woman did the cover, and another woman did the line drawings.
Okay, great.
They happened to work together in a design studio.
And did you have any input on how the art would look? Did you have to reject anything?
This we did a little bit back and forth. I wanted something that looked very New York, and I think it does, without being overdone. It's sort of the cat dominating the sky.
It's really great. Well, Stanley, are there any final things you'd like to say about the book?
I enjoyed writing this book. I had a good time with it.
I enjoyed reading it.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope a lot of people will.
Yeah.
It was a labor that took quite some time. I'm a slow writer. And as I said, I don't plan very well. Sometimes these things just unfold on their own. I didn't plan the whole book to be exactly what it is. I did a lot of revision. I worked with a couple of other people in a writing group, 2 other women and myself, 3 other women actually. One of them has passed away. And we read to each other, and I did that. This evolved over a couple of years. It took 2 years to do this. And then came the awful part of trying to find a publisher, which is really dreary. This is published by an outfit called iUniverse, which is a self-publishing company. You basically pay them to publish your book, and that's basically what they do. They don't do any marketing. However, they did give some editorial evaluations here, some of which I paid for, some of which they did. And they designated this an editor's choice book, which they don't do for everything they publish. So that pleased me very much.
And this was a good choice. This is a great book.
Well, thank you. So, but I will say that because I've written fiction and nonfiction, marketing fiction is very difficult. If you write the previous book to this is a nonfiction book called Living Alone Creatively, How 10 People Do It. I interview different people, real people, who are living without boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives, partners, but living interesting, successful, creative lives. People who are single can identify with that subject and do. That book is still selling, even though it's like 4 years old. Fiction is different, you know, and it's particularly difficult to sell if the book is not in bookstores. This book is not in bookstores. This book only sells through the internet or through word of mouth from people or giveaways or whatever. I have a website. If people go there, they will see the whole story of this book and other books of mine. But then somebody has to get to the website too. You know? So selling fiction is hard. If it's in a bookstore and somebody is browsing and happens to see this cover, oh, that looks interesting. But these books are not in bookstores. So that selling fiction is difficult. I'm not sure I want to do any more novels. I think the next book will probably be a group of short pieces, nonfiction, real things, memoir type pieces, which I like to do. And maybe people will like that. But I'm glad you've done it. I feel good about the book.
I'm glad you feel good about this book, because I feel great about this book. 10 Ways to Your Cat's Happiness, a novel. It is, as Stanley said, this is an editor's choice from iUniverse Publishing, and Stanley is a very wonderful author, a great writer.
Can I just give a little plug for my website?
Absolutely.
All right. The name of my website is www.stanleyeli, one word, stanleyeli.com. And in there, all my books are illustrated and explained, and there are links to buy them.
Absolutely. It's a great website, too. It's got really nice designs. So check out Stanley Eli's website and check out 10 Ways to Your Cat's Happiness, a novel. If enough people read it, enough people buy it, maybe we'll get a sequel. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah?
Maybe.
We'll work on that. And thank you very much. This was the first interview for Holy Av, a community for viewing arts and entertainment through a Jewish lens. Well, we're not sure if this is going to be an audio thing. See, we're making an audio recording on this computer. And we're also doing a video with that camera down there. So you might have watched this, you might have listened to it. We'll find out later. And leave us some comments, leave us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. and write to us at oholiav, OHOLIAV @gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.